So good morning. Thanks for joining the webinar. We're going to talk about AAD B2B and AAD B2C and a little bit about verified identity this morning. Just a little intro to me. I'm Marcus Idle. I'm the head of external identity at Coacho. So my team works with these technologies, primarily B2B, B2C, and verified ID. And I've been here for coming up to 8 years. Let's get started. We're going to talk about the problem of external ID, why we need to use these technologies. We're going to talk about B2B collaboration, what it offers, and then go on to B2C, a little bit about verified ID, and then talk about the next steps you can take with your organization. A little bit about Coacho. We have been a Microsoft partner for over 20 years now, and just to indicate the strength of our relationship with Microsoft, Alex Simons, one of the corporate vice presidents, talked about us as in terms of there's no other partner in the world we work with more closely. So if you want to find out a little bit more about what we do in our credentials, then obviously please talk to one of us or come and see the website. Okay, so what is the problem of external ID? First of all, we want to provide access. So, we want external users to be able to collaborate with us and use resources, but at the same time, we don't want a proliferation of access points. We want to understand how to prevent attacks. And ideally, we want one tool for taking care of our access, including our internal users and our external users. And that will enable us to focus on, security in one place, rather than trying to understand a variety of tools and how they work differently to each other. So before I dive in to some of the technology, it'd be interesting to hear what your external identity challenge is. So there will be a poll coming up. Please, if you're able to, select the most relevant answer for you on this poll, so we can understand your challenges today. Okay, so a lot of you selecting the first one, supplier onboarding, collaboration, and lifecycle, but we've got a mix of other options. Thank you very much for that. That's very useful. We will be focusing, in fact, on the first one, but hoping to address all of your different challenges. So just a quick word about Entra. So B2B and B2C live in Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory is one component of Microsoft Entra, which also includes verified ID and permissions management. And with Entra, you've got a number of capabilities. You've got a way to kind of collect all your resources under one roof and protect access to them. You've got great identity tools working to secure your identities and make sure that your users have one and not a proliferation of identities. You've got ways to kind of manage and govern access and make sure you're providing only the necessary access and not getting into a world of kind of spaghetti permissions and so on. And you've got ways of simplifying the user experience, making it easy for your users to onboard. Whatever reason you have for onboarding users, it will, usually help your business if they can onboard easily. They're going to find ways of dropping out of the process if you create too many bottlenecks for them. So one of the features that obviously underpins this is multi-factor authentication. If you turn on MFA, you eliminate a huge percentage of attacks. and now you've got different ways of applying MFA. So not just the old telephone call or SMS text message. You've got a variety of ways, including the Authenticator app, which provides new ways of making sure the user is who they say they are, and they're not just responding to spam MFA requests. So you can now see kind of the location of the request and confirm with a 2-digit code. So these are tools that really help to make sure that your identities are who they say they are, which underpins some of the stuff we're going to be talking about with B2B and B2C. And of course, conditional access is crucial here. So it's a way of making sure you limit the number of MFA requests to a reasonable level. So over on the left here, you've got signals coming in about user and location, what device they're on, what applications you're using, and so on. Microsoft also understands kind of, you know, whether your access is part of a botnet attack, whether your credentials have been stolen. So there's a bunch of information that Microsoft processes in order to provide you with a risk level, and based on that risk level, you can make some decisions. So you can say, we're allowing access, we need MFA this time, we're going to limit access. So you can have applications which work with AAD to understand that you're limiting access. So that can work its way through to the functionality available in the application. And yeah, in extreme cases, you can cut off access together or force a password reset. And Azure offers identity protection, so this includes things like logging, threat alerts, risk scores, sign-in reports, and so on. So you can understand the landscape, you can understand you know, where the riskiest sign-ins are, and so on. And it's all about making sure that everything's under one roof. So Microsoft offers a suite of applications under Azure Marketplace, which naturally connect into Azure AD, but you can connect any application, you can write your own, you can connect in legacy homegrown applications. You know, it's possible to connect almost anything into Azure AD for identity, so for sign-in to your application. And if you have any struggles with this, if your users are creating or onboarding onto applications outside of your estate, outside of Azure AD, we can help with that. So on to external identities. So here's the myth. Your organization connects to other large organizations using Azure AD B2B, and you allow individuals to access your products and services using Azure AD B2C. So this is what we're going to debunk, and essentially we're going to show you, the strengths of each platform and where you should be focusing. And then we're going to talk a little bit about decentralized identity, which is surfaced in Azure under a product called Verified ID, which is obviously also part of the kind of Entra family, but particularly useful for ensuring the validity of external identities. So let's talk about B2B. We've just said, this is a way for organizations to connect with you, and it is. So the pattern that happens here is your organization, which is represented over here on the right, will contain a record for all of your employees, for example, if you use Azure AD as your identity provider. But it can also contain records for your external people that you want to collaborate with you. So, for example, you're a marketing department, you get a design agency to come in and work with you. They might need to set up ads on your behalf or collaborate on documents, work within Office 365. So essentially work as part of your team, and for that they need to access the same applications as your team members. So here you're creating a record for them in your Active Directory, but the twist is you're not giving them a username and password. So what happens is when they try to access any application that you've given them access to, they will be redirected back to their own identity provider. So for example, their own Azure Active Directory or Google Workspace to do a sign-in. What happens when they've signed in? Their identity provider will know to redirect back to your Azure AD because that's where they've come from. There's a bit of information exchange going on. There's a relationship between the two, and because of this relationship as well, they will come back to Azure AD with a token. So this is essentially in the form of a cookie, and this token will be unpacked by Azure AD, and Azure AD will then understand who they are, typically their email address, but also it could be other attributes about them. So what's happening is they don't need to create an extra password. They are simply signing in with their existing corporate username and password. What does that do? That prevents you from having to kind of manage their passwords for them, and to kind of have to remove them in order to remove access when they leave their organization. If they've left their organization, then automatically they can't do that sign-in that we've just talked about. So they can't have access. We'll talk about some other sort of user lifecycle tools, but that's essentially the thing that's preventing them from carrying on signing in when they no longer have access. And it could be a bad actor. We've seen this before where people have had access way past the time they should, and effectively stolen from organizations like the one we're talking about here. So that's if they have Azure AD or Google Workspace or any other sort of heavyweight identity provider. But they can also access your directory and your tools and Office 365 and so on if they're an individual, or if they have, even if they're part of a small company which doesn't have a major identity provider. So the way this works is you send them an email invite, and they will respond and sign in using their email. Once they've typed in their email, they'll receive a one-time passcode sent to their email. When they type in this one-time passcode into Azure Active Directory, they'll be signed in for 24 hours. So they'll have all this access that you've managed essentially within your directory, but that token is essentially provided by the one-time passcode. So this Azure Active Directory B2B is suitable for large organizations, small organizations, even individuals, and it provides some lifecycle management, which we'll go on to talk about, but essentially entitlements or access packages, and something called access reviews, where you get to review their access on a regular basis. So as I mentioned, so over on the right, we've got different ways of signing in, Google, Azure Active Directory, one-time passcode, and so on. We've got a policy engine which figures out, what the experience should be and how the security should be. And this works for employees, partners, and customers. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship you have with your external, you can put them through this process. So I talked about sending an invite. That's one way of onboarding external users into your organization. And that's the kind of the oldest way. So you go into the Azure portal, you type in an email address, and the invite goes out. The little semicircle there indicates this is a process driven from your organization, not from the external user. So it's an invite driven from Azure AD. You can invite users in bulk, pretty much the same process, only you have to upload a CSV into Azure AD. And you can invite users via Graph API. So this is where your software will interact with Azure AD and send the invitation out itself. You can bypass the email that goes out from Azure and just send the invitation link in your own email. So you get a slightly nicer experience. And you can have external users sign up for access packages. So these are bundles of different resources. You can have many resources bundled up into one access package. If you decide, okay, this group of external users, they need access to our marketing folder, our project management application, and so on. And this also has an approval stage. So that's why we have the semicircle both ends. So we have the person, the external user, applying for access, and then we have an approver whose job it is to approve their access, of course. And then finally, we have a kind of fully automated sign up, self-service sign up, or self-service user flows. In this case, you don't have a manual approval, but you need some way of verifying the user is who they say they are. So you can do this in the form of a code that they know, or a supplier ID, for example, that matches your supplier database. And during this sign-up process, you can connect up to an API. So you can write an API that connects up to your back office. So you can do this check against whatever code or other information your external user has put in. So quite a lot of options there. However, the experience is, pretty beige in terms of, how the end user perceives your organization during onboarding. So it's a very kind of Microsoft-centric experience, and we'll show you one of those in a second. But obviously, once they've onboarded, you can manage their user lifecycle, as we said, with kind of access reviews and entitlements, and also PIM, privileged identity management, which is if you give them a basic role to start with, or for everyday work, and then occasionally they need some higher level of privilege in order to do something a little bit more risky. So, for example, user management, then they can invoke PIM. So they can apply for a role that gets audited. You can also have an approval process, so you can block them from receiving that role until they have a manual approval, but it's very configurable. So as I mentioned, we've got a little demo of how access packages work. This is the Azure AD view of it. So this is the setup from the point of view of an administrator. They will create an access package, give it a name and a description, give it a catalog, which is a way of making it available to internal users to manage it. So here's a catalog, and then obviously as a package, we need to add resources into it so they have access to something. These can be security groups, teams, specific applications you've linked into Azure AD or SharePoint sites. Then we decide who it's for. We're going to say external users here and any external users. So this will be including one-time passcode users. So people who are not connected via Azure AD or any other organizational connection. In this case, we have to have an approver if it's available to all. So we have to select one here. Or as you could see, we've got different options. So organizational sponsors, managers, resource owners, and so on. This one just turns it on. And next section here is we can ask questions of the potential external users so that we can have a better idea of who they are, a better chance of verifying their identity for the approver. And we can manage the life cycle of the access package, so we can have it only available for a specific number of days or until a specific date. And we can require access reviews, so we can turn this on so they have a review that goes out every week, month, quarter, and so on. And you can do this with security groups as well. So access reviews are not just for access packages. They're a very useful feature here. And just that last bit was you can create events. So, for example, being granted an assignment, which then cause other actions to happen. So you can set up logic apps, for example, which kick in when someone is granted access. So, having created the access package, we're now going in as an external user, and we're going to apply for this access package. So we've had this link provided to us, either by our main contact at Biscuits, the organization, or perhaps our main contact in our own company and our external company. We've decided, yes, we want to apply for marketing agency access. So now we need to answer the questions that we've been sent, and then we can hit request access. Okay, and we're going to go on to the experience of the approver in just one moment. So the approver will get an email saying please approve or deny the request, and that email will obviously take them back to a portal where they can do the approval. That portal is actually exactly the same. It's called the My Access portal. And as I mentioned, it's a pretty kind of beige experience. It's you can't customize this experience for your external users or your approvers. But here we go. We've decided we're going to look at this request, and we're going to approve it. And again, we're going to audit the reason for approval. So all of this can be tracked back. So at this point, an email will go out to the external user. As we'll see, you've received access, and then obviously now the external user can go into My Apps or go to a specific app and start accessing the things that they need access to. The emails here, obviously, again, they're pretty bland. You can now customize this because you can, as I mentioned, you can have events which trigger actions. So you could send out an email using a logic app potentially. And of course, where we have access packages, we have groups, applications, and SharePoint sites. And when somebody applies and gets approved, we can then push them into this cycle of access reviews. So an access review goes out by email, somebody makes a decision, and then there's an outcome, which is obviously if they no longer should have access, then they exit. You can remove them completely from the organization if they've lost access to the last access package they had, or they can go into the next cycle, the next week, month, or quarter, and so on. So managing the user lifecycle is obviously a really important benefit of using B2B to bring your external users into your organization. Let's talk about B2C. Again, we talked about the myth of B2C being only for individuals. It's obviously, as the name would imply, business to consumer or business to customer. But actually, it's a really good way of customizing the experience for anybody who you want to bring into your organization. So it could be they just want to buy something from you, for example, or it could be much closer relationship, could be some kind of partnership, or they're a broker for your services. But whatever it is, they could be an organization. They don't just have to be an individual. You can use B2C for this purpose. And the benefit that B2C brings is usability. So creating an onboarding experience which is very smooth for the end user, very easy, and customized to your brand. So how does B2C work? Over in the bottom right, we've got users who want to access your stuff. So they'll typically, hit your website or your mobile app. And at this point, if that application is hooked up to B2C, they will be redirected to B2C to sign in. Of course, they might be able to browse before sign in. This might be a result of hitting a sign in button or login button. So within B2C, you have this authentication experience, which could be username and password sign in, but it's very, very flexible. So you could have a completely passwordless sign in, a phone sign in, or one-time passcode based sign in. You can create your own type of sign in. And you can customize it, so you can make it look like your organization. It's a completely seamless process for the end user. And during this experience, you can do other things. So you can make calls into your back office, either to do some user provisioning or retrieve some information, and you can make decisions. You can do branching based on that. So within the authentication experience, you can you can send the user in one direction or another, and make decisions on what kind of input they've provided. And the security, as you might imagine, is based on the existing Entra Azure Active Directory security. So secured at rest, secured the communication between your application and B2C with industry strength OpenID Connect. And on the front end, again, Microsoft receives signals about the user, the session, what's going on with current cyber attacks, and makes a decision on risk level based on those signals. And you can again apply conditional access based on that risk. This is an out-of-the-box B2C experience, and the thing you'll notice at the top is you can provide the user with the ability to sign in with multiple different types of social IDs. So these are just 4 of them. There's a longer list, and it means that again the user doesn't need to create a password. So you can create a very quick sign-in. For example, if they're already signed into Facebook, they can hit the Facebook button. The first time they sign in, they just need to accept a permissions dialog from Facebook to say, yes, I want to connect here, and then they're signed in, unless you want to collect other attributes, in which case it can be a longer process, of course. But obviously the aim here is to make it as smooth as possible for users to onboard to your organization, because whatever it is you're trying to do with them, whether it's sell or acquire members or whatever it is, the obvious point is, if there's fewer bottlenecks, then your organization benefits. So that was the out-of-the-box experience. You can customize it how you like. So you can customize every pixel on the screen. You can even use JavaScript. So here are just a few examples of customized B2C authentication experiences. And we talked about the different, the 5 different ways we onboarded people onto B2B. Actually, on B2C, you can do any of this, although the out-of-the-box experience is geared up to self-registration rather than invite. But you can implement any of these using custom policies, and you can write your own stories. So you can have a process like this where users have to accept terms and conditions and then prove who they are using, for example, some activation code or some information that you can check about the user, set up a password, set up MFA, and access the documents. This is a process we wrote for an insurance company who had an existing relationship with users offline and wanted users to start using their website. So they needed to go through a process where they proved who they were. So just finally, verified ID, which has very recently come into play. This is a way for you to ensure that you know something about the user that's interacting with you, and they have control over what information they share. They can store credentials on their phone in the form of there's an authenticator app. Well, the existing Microsoft Authenticator app has a section for verified credentials. A great example of this is onboarding with an organization. You normally bring your passport in on day one to prove who you are. If you want to do that remotely, you could use a passport verifier service. This could create a credential on the user's phone, on their authenticator app, and you could present this credential to your company, your onboarding process. Why would you not do this in one place on your onboarding process? Is because once you have an issuer, so the issuer is the entity that issues the credential. If you have a passport check service that can issue credentials, you only have to do that once, and multiple organizations can take advantage of that. And all they need to do is use verified ID compatible code. So they only need to write code that talks to the Entra verified ID service, which is very small amount of code to write. You don't need to kind of interact with the issuer. You don't need to interact with other organizations you want to find information about the users from. So very briefly, you've got the issuer, you've got the individual who stores the credentials on their phone, you've got the verifier, which is the organization they want to sign into, for example. And the verifier, as well as understanding the credential from the individual's phone, will check it against the ledger, so a public ledger here called the Verifiable Data Registry. So Entra provides the ability to issue credentials, verify credentials by, you call Entra using an API to verify the credential, and to display a QR code for the user to interact with in order to receive and to present credentials. So we've got other information on the website about verified ID. That was just a very brief overview, but just to summarize what we said about external identities in this webinar. Azure AD B2B is there for lifecycle management and for your external users to interact in the same space as your employees. Whereas B2C is there to enable really smooth onboarding experience and provide greater customization of that identity sign-in and sign-on experience. Just a quick, before we go to Q&A, a quick word about other services we provide at Cocho. It's not just about external ID. We cover identity, security, business transformation, and a number of other services. So quick poll before we go to questions. Are you interested in more information? So if you are, please select one of these options, and we can get in touch afterwards and provide you with more information on one of these. So we're going to go to questions. We've got 5 more minutes. If you do have a question, please type it into the panel and go to webinar, and I'll do my best to answer it. Okay, so we have a question about self-service user flows. What do they look like? So I don't have spare slides on this, but essentially you can interact with self-service user flows from any application. But once the user hits the self-service user flow, they will get a very sort of standard screen with your corporate background, but in the middle you will just see a kind of standard AAD sign-in screen. So yeah, it's getting better, slightly more customizable, but it's not quite as customizable as B2C. Okay, I have a question about Facebook. In terms of B2C, are the risks with Facebook and others if they're using weak passwords, etc.? Yeah, so obviously, if you're using any external identity provider, the strength of the security that B2C provides is just as strong as that, is only as strong as that external provider, unless you're using other factors like MFA. So if you understand that people generally are signed into Facebook all day, and if your users are prone to keeping their laptops open and that kind of thing, and your B2C provides access to, for example, account details, bank details, and so on, you might want to think about employing MFA as a second factor. I wouldn't necessarily go down the username and password route, but certainly you need to think about what measures you're taking to ensure the identity of your users. There's a question about, sorry, 1 second. In B2B, what happens if the access review is not responded to? Yeah, so you can configure this either way. So you can just get a report on the outcome of the access review, or you can configure the access review to automatically remove people who haven't responded, or automatically remove users where their manager or whoever's doing the review hasn't responded. Can we test Azure B2C by getting a new domain? So it's very easy to set up new B2C domains, and the pricing model is very simple. You only start paying when you get more than 50,000 monthly active users. So I think the short answer to that is yes, but do get in touch if I haven't answered that, or you need more information. Can you set up access packages for B2C users? Yeah, so that's the real difference between B2B and B2C. You can't do access packages out of the box for B2C users. You would need to create your own version of that. So that's where you ultimately have to choose. I do want to mention though that Microsoft are thinking hard about convergence. It's not on it's not on the horizon yet. There's no kind of date for it, but this might be something you can do in a few years' time. Can we enforce MFA for both B2C and B2B as mandatory? Yes. Sorry, there are a few more questions, but we have run out of time, so we will try and answer the questions individually with you after the webinar. And just a question about the presentation, yeah, we will, if you want the presentation as well as the recording, make a request and we can make it available to you, but the recording will be available on the website for anyone to download. Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending, and thanks for all your questions. Obviously, it's great to get a lot of questions, and sorry we didn't have time to answer all of them. But like I said, please follow up with your account manager, or if you don't have an account manager or don't know your account manager, just use the email address hello@cocho.co.uk, and we'll talk to you very soon. Thank you very much.